This is ABA 636, Section B, 122 cards. Phylogeny is natural selection in the blank history of a species. Evolutionary. Tact extensions are distinguished by degree to which a novel stimulus shares the relevant features of the original blank. Stimulus. The four types of tact: generic, metaphorical, blank, and solistic. Metonymical. In a DRD schedule, the criterion is blank based on the individual's performance. Decreased. In an autoclitic, the secondary autoclitic response give the listener more information about the blank blank. Primary response. A schedule that provides reinforcement every 6 responses is a blank blank. Fixed ratio. The goal of errorless learning is a blank of errors. Minimum. Nia wants water and finger spells water. Manned. The therapist compounds the trained and natural stimulus to minimize errors while transferring stimulus control. Errorless learning. Motivating operations can change whether something functions as reinforcement, while discriminative stimulus is a signal that blank is available. Reinforcement. With a variable ratio schedule, blank rates of response are expected. Quick. A conditioned reinforcer is an event or stimulus that acquires its reinforcing function over the blank of the organism. Lifetime. Nia bangs her hands at similar rates in all conditions. This is possible blank reinforcement. Automatic. Nia gets access to a preferred item in her rate of heating is below 2 per hour. This is a blank procedure. DRL. Differential reinforcement of low rates. Negative punishment is to blank, as negative reinforcement is to increase. Decrease. Extinction includes no reinforcement of a blank reinforced behavior. Previously. Motivating operations have a blank effect and a behavior altering effect. Value altering. A blank is an event produced by a response. Consequence. Praise that had been paired with access to a known reinforcer and now is a reinforcer is a blank blank. Conditioned reinforcer. In an autoclitic, the primary response can be any type of blank blank. Verbal operant. A man's form is under the control of motivating operations in blank blank. Specific reinforcement. A consequence is a condition or blank following a behavior of interest. Stimulus. The goal of errorless learning is blank stimulus control with a minimum of errors. Transferring. Phylogeny is natural selection in the evolutionary history of a blank species. In a DRH, reinforcement is contingent on the number of responses in a period of time, blank a criterion. Exceeding. Reinforcer assessment refers to a variety of direct and blank methods for assessing reinforcer effectiveness. Empirical. Negative punishment is to remove as positive punishment is to blank. Add. Nia hits fewer than 5 times an hour for reinforcement, and the criterion will decrease based on her performance. DRD, differential reinforcement of diminishing rates. The therapist says water, and Nia says water. Echoic. Duplic relations have a history of blank blank. Generalized reinforcement. The 3-term contingency is blank, behavior, consequence, antecedent. Nia's hand-raising behavior is much more frequent in the presence of the math teacher who praises her. Hand-raising is under blank blank. Stimulus control. An echoic is controlled by a blank discriminative stimulus. Verbal. Copying a text is a blank verbal operand. Elementary. A schedule that provides reinforcement an average of every 6 responsive. Variable ratio, VR. Ontology is selection by consequences during the life of a blank organism, individual. An unconditioned reinforcer is a reinforcing stimulus that has acquired its properties as a function of species blank. History. A tact is under the functional control of a blank discriminative stimulus, nonverbal. The 3-term contingency is antecedent behavior blank. Consequence. Positive punishment involves the blank of a stimulus that follows a behavior. Addition. Nia says, I think this is water. Autoclitic. Verbal behavior uses vocal verbal behavior and blank verbal behavior, non-vocal. Nia sees a lake and signs water, tact. Some dimensions that are exaggerated in stimulus fading are color, blank, or position, size. Formal similarity requires the response to blank blank the stimulus. Physically resemble. A behavior followed by blank of a stimulus that increases the future rate of similar responses is positive reinforcement. Presentation. A teacher who gives candy for in-seat behavior is out. The substitute has no candy. The teacher is a blank blank discriminative stimulus. Variable ratio schedules produce blank, steady rates of response, consistent. Ontology is selection by blank during the life of an individual organism. Consequences. Elementary verbal operands are distinguished by their sources of antecedent control and the related history of blank. Consequences. In a DRL, reinforcement is contingent on the number of responses in a period of time, not blank a criterion. Exceeding. Motor imitation, sign language, has a history of blank reinforcement. Generalized. Hearing yay is an example of a blank blank reinforcer for some people. Generalized condition. With a fixed interval schedule, slow to blank rates of response are expected. Moderate. A schedule that provides reinforcement for the first response after 6 minutes is a blank blank schedule. FI, fixed interval. A behavior is any blank, an observable act of an organism. Measurable. With a fixed ratio schedule, a blank blank follows reinforcement. PRP, post-reinforcement pause. Automatic reinforcement is usually produced automatically by the blank. Response. An antecedent occurs blank to the behavior of interest. Prior. The 3 types of duplicate relations are blank, motor imitation, and copying text. Echoic. The verbal operant copying a text must have blank blank and formal similarity with the controlling response. Point-to-point correspondence. Textual and taking dictation are both types of blank relations. Coding. The therapist signs milk and Nia signs milk. Motor imitation, sign language. With a variable interval schedule, low to blank rates of response are expected. Moderate. Nia sees the word water and writes water, copying a text. Nia hears the word water and types water, taking dictation. Extinction involves blank reinforcement for a previously reinforced behavior, withholding. Skinner defined a verbal behavior by the function of the blank rather than by its form. behavior. Positive reinforcement involves the occurrence of a stimulus immediately following the responding that results in a blank over baseline levels increase. A schedule that provides reinforcement an average of every 6 minutes. VI, variable interval. An unconditioned reinforcer's effectiveness blank depend on its contingent relation to another reinforcer. Does not. Stimulus control describes a situation in which a behavior is altered by the presence or blank of an antecedent stimulus. Absence. In a DRH procedure, behavior is reinforced if it occurs blank, a period of time elapses since its last occurrence, before. Nia sees a dog, says dog, and gets to pet the dog. Seeing a dog is a blank, antecedent. Food and water are examples of unconditioned blank, reinforcers. Formal similarity requires the same blank mode, sense. Behavior is reinforced if it occurs following a period of time since its last occurrence in a blank schedule. DRL, differential reinforcement of low rates. The therapist says, "What's that?" and Nia says, "Water." Nia's operant is a blank, interverbal. Textuals and echoics are different because the response product of a textual is not blank to its controlling stimulus. Similar. Verbal behavior incorporates language topics, including blank, composition, and understanding. Grammar. Man, tact, interverbal, duplic, and codic are blank operants. Elementary verbal. Echoic verbal operants produce blank reinforcement. Generalized condition. Negative punishment involves the blank of a stimulus that follows a behavior. Removal. The specific reinforcement that strengthens a man is directly related to the relevant blank. MO, motivating operation. A behavior is measurable and blank, observable. Common stimulus prompts are blank, position, and redundancy of antecedent stimuli. Movement. Duplic relations have blank. Formal similarity. A conditioned reinforcer is a neutral stimulus turned reinforcer due to pairing with other blank reinforcers. When using stimulus prompts, there is a risk of prompt blank dependence. Negative punishment involves blank the future rate of similar responses under similar conditions, decreasing. Nia sees the word water and says water, textual. Codic relations have a history of blank. Generalized reinforcement. Attacked produces blank reinforcement. Generalized condition. The three-term contingency is antecedent blank consequence. Behavior. In stimulus fading, the highlighted dimension is eventually blank in or out, faded. Unlike a progressive ratio schedule, a blank schedule changes criterion based on the individual's performance. DRD, differential reinforcement of diminishing rates. The therapist wants the correct choice much closer to Nia, but now only puts it slightly closer. Stimulus fading. Motor imitation, sign language, is blank verbal behavior. Duplic. The analyst is assessing reinforcer effectiveness systematically. This is a blank reinforcer assessment. In transcription behavior, a spoken verbal stimulus controls a blank, typed, or finger misspelled response. Written. Codic relations have point-to-point correspondence, but no blank. Formal similarity. A generalized condition reinforcer does not depend on a blank for its effectiveness. Establishing operation. A fixed interval schedule produces a blank blank during the early part of the interval. PRP, post-reinforcement pause. In an interval, the verbal stimulus and verbal blank do not match each other. Response. The blank reinforcers, a generalized condition reinforcer, has been paired with the greater the likelihood it will be effective. More. Positive punishment involves blank, the future rate of similar responses under similar conditions, decreasing. Deprivation or citation can change blank, increasing or decreasing the effectiveness of known reinforcers, MOs, motivating operations. There are two kinds of multiple control of verbal behavior: blank multiple control and convergent multiple control. Divergent. Elementary verbal operands are distinguished by their sources of blank blank and their related history of consequences. Antecedent control. Motivating operations include both establishing operations and blank operations. Abolishing. Nia gets access to a preferred item in her rate of hand raising is above 2 per period. This is a blank procedure. DRH, differential reinforcement of high rates. In automatic reinforcement, blank is inherent in the response itself. Reinforcement. A textual has point-to-point correspondence, but not blank blank. Formal similarity. Nia's mom gives Cheerios each time Nia says more. The response more increases at breakfast. This is positive blank. Reinforcement. Variable interval schedules produce constant blank rates of response. Stable. With a fixed ratio schedule, blank rates of response are expected. Quick. Reinforcer assessment refers to a blank of direct and empirical methods for assessing reinforcer effectiveness. Variety. Stimulus control is the discriminative control of blank. Behavior. A discriminative stimulus signals that reinforcement is blank for a specific behavioral response. Available. Nia's echoic hand sign for water physically resembled the therapist's hand sign for water. The signs have blank blank. Formal similarity. An interverbal is under the functional control of blank blank reinforcement. Generalized condition. Extinction is one of several ways to blank the rate of behavior. Decrease.